Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we're super excited that we have Rachel Edmondson Clark with us from all the way over in the UK. So although it's early in the morning here, she's about 3 or 2:30 in the afternoon there. But Rachel is considered to be a powerhouse in leadership psychology and human performance with over 20 years of experience, which I don't know how that can be true because I think she's only 30 years old. She has been helping senior leaders with Fortune 500 companies and high growth businesses thrive under pressure without burning out. I want to stress that part. But Rachel, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you end up being the powerhouse that you are today?
Oh, well, Amos, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show and for that lovely introduction and the fabulous compliment. What the listeners don't know is that I did just whisper to Amos that I was born in 1980. So, I am well and truly 45 years old. So thank you for that. Thank you for that lovely compliment. So as you said, I guess the whole accent thing, I am based in England, in Nottingham. We were just talking about Robin Hood. That is, Sherwood Forest is very close to where I live. But outside of the location, I'm a leadership coach, a speaker, and I'm founder of Elevar. And we work with leaders and teams who are doing big, brilliant work, often under pressure. And we help them to lead better, to live better, and to love what they do, especially when things feel uncertain or fast moving. In terms of my journey, it's taken me from senior leadership roles in corporate to burnout and to running my own business for over a decade. And it genuinely feels like it's my purpose and my soul's calling. I absolutely love what I do. And at the heart of it, it's about helping people to lead and live in a way that feels clear and grounded and true to who they are. I'm also, like you, Amos, I'm a parent. So I'm wife to my husband, Alan, mum to my 2 young boys. I absolutely love the outdoors, and I'm a little bit, I'm going to say healthily obsessed with leadership and performance. So I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today.
Awesome. And you said your love of the outdoors. I do have to tell you that when I was looking over your material, there's a picture at the beginning of it with you with a backpack on, just, jumping into the air, taking off into a hike maybe. And it made me a little jealous. I love hiking and probably don't get out there enough. So oftentimes when I find and talk with leadership experts, we start to learn and find out that many times there is a turning point in their life. And you mentioned being in the corporate world, moving to burnout, and now running your own business. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you kind of had a moment where you physically collapsed in your office and had that turning point. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you get to that point where you were collapsing in your office and then get from there? How did you get out of there is probably the biggest question.
I can remember vividly the afternoon that it happened. I was preparing to go into the boardroom, and instead of walking out of my office, I found myself lying on the floor, staring up at the ceiling tiles. I'd collapsed. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't breathe, was the really scary thing. I guess I knew a lot at that time, and I'd been very rigorously putting into practice all that I knew about reframing and regulation of emotion. And so what I did was I applied some breathing techniques in that moment. I didn't realize it, but actually what it was a panic attack. I'd never had one before. I'd never experienced one before. And so I went to some breathing techniques immediately, which got me off the floor and got me to a position where I could go and get some help. and get someone who I trusted to come into my office and to support me. But my cognitive function was absolutely shocking at that point. And I was sort of still trying to get my act together to get into the boardroom and go and deliver my presentation that afternoon. And coming out of that, I often describe this as like, it was like life was hitting me around the face. I don't know why I choose this analogy, like with a great big wet fish. It was like it was slapping me around the chops, kind of just going, wake up, because it was that point. I'd over months, potentially even years, I had I disrespected my body. I neglected the most important relationship in my life, and I was, felt guilty. I felt quite ashamed, and the only answer I had to it all was just work harder, keep working harder. Get to the end of the day, get to the weekend, get to the next holiday, like get over this hump, get over this project, get over this presentation, and you'll get there. And my body just went time out. And it was literally, I'd ignored the signs long enough. And that's it. That's why I think I describe it like being slapped around the face with a great big wet fish, because it was like, you can't do this. You can't do this anymore. This is time to wake up.
So I think that is I think it's more prevalent than anybody will ever admit. That these things happen to busy executives, people that we would believe, looking from the outside in, are highly successful, have everything together, and never miss a beat. I will share, and I don't often share, but I have suffered from 3 of those such attacks in my life. The first time was a time where I had moved across the country away from my family system and away from everything, and kind of had that moment where, you're thinking like, what did I just do? And, I have no support, so on and so forth. The second time was when I was pushing, to your point, my body to a point where I felt I had an obstacle that had to be overcome. And I just felt that I could do it. Even if I didn't sleep, didn't eat for 6 weeks, didn't matter. I can make this happen. And eventually your body just stops and says, hey, it's time to stop here. And my purpose for pausing and sharing that little bit, and because you have mentioned it, I think it's so important that we share, because people don't talk about it. When you're having one of those moments, it's okay to go find somebody that can help you, whether that is making your way to a hospital, making your way to a friend, whatever the case is, because in the person that's happening to, in their mind, they might think they're having a heart attack. They might think they're having, a serious health issue, but it's really our body just saying, time out. You need to take a pause. But the other thing is, for everybody that might be seeing somebody go through this, it's a very serious thing to them. I mean, to the person that it's happening to, don't dismiss it. Don't just ignore it and think they'll get better, or say, well, go get a nap and come back to work. I think it's, it's something that probably happens in some scale to most people that are highly successful and highly motivated. So once you so firstly, thank you for sharing your stories on there, and I think it is really important that we recognize people must ask for that help and to speak to somebody about what's going on. Just to let you know where my head had been at, I kept thinking somebody would notice, and there's not many people I've shared this with, but one of the things I remember doing one morning heading into work was actually taking dark eyeshadow that you'd normally put on your eyelids and dabbing it underneath my eyes, going in with very little makeup, thinking surely somebody is going to look at me and go, are you okay, Rachel? And like they're going to reach out. And no one did.
And that might sound a little bit pathetic, and I feel almost a little bit pathetic sharing that, but I do it because it took that collapse. And I was lucky in many senses. I know I've now got friends who have ended up paralyzed, for example, or for months, needing to take time to recover from burnout. And and I think, I mean, part of the journey that I've been on since then, and that I think is really perhaps helpful and useful and interesting, is that a lot of this is predictive. And actually, you talked about high performers experiencing this. And I think there are traits in high performing people that make them more susceptible to burnout. I think the environments that they're often in, and the high expectations that they have of themselves, their ability to reframe the stress and kind of just go, well, actually, I can just push on, and I'll be, and I'll be okay. I've been okay before. I'm going to be okay again. And so, they'll often be with other high performers as well. And I think all of that can encourage potentially unhealthy behaviors. And it's really, and actually, I look at it now. I do a lot of work with a guy here in the UK. His name's Professor Chris Beatty. And he is a professor of cognition and neuroscience and of evolutionary anthropology at Oxford and Kent University. And he's been studying for the last 20 years the relationship between mood, emotion, and high performance. So he works with the British Army and elite endurance athletes. And together we work with, sort of in the corporate and in that executive world. And there are some very simple, very practical, and also scientific-based things that it's predictable. If you don't pay attention to these things, it's going to impact your health, your performance. It's likely to lead to burnout, departure, and so actually it's more predictable than perhaps we might first realize.
Well, I want to touch on that, but I want to go back one step and ask one question. It just hit me. So you've been through burnout. You've brought yourself out of that. How, and with the people you work with as well, that maybe have experienced this, how often do people later get themselves close to the brink of burnout or do it again? Is it what I'm really, many times people may say, well, I need a change. And so they go start a business, or they go into a different line of work. But then I have watched this over and over again. They do the same thing over again, many times. And so I guess really what the question is, how do you keep yourself from going to your natural tendencies and taking yourself to the brink of burnout again?
It's such a good question. And you're right, because I think what happens is when we get that sense of achievement, like we've done that thing, we get the dopamine hit, don't we? And so it's kind of like, let's get after that again. And so the pattern or the cycle can easily repeat itself. And let me be really honest. So the story I shared of me in corporate was probably almost 15 years ago now. But in running my own business, I've also been challenged and come close to burnout again. Not least pressures and things were very different during COVID. We had a very young family, homeschooling, me and my husband still working throughout COVID. That was, you could really tell, because I wasn't able to restore myself with sleep, with the daylight, the movement, the things that, all the stuff that your grandma says you've got to do to be able to perform and function well, and your ability to increase your bandwidth to deal with stress. That was very difficult because of what we were managing between us and just within our household during lockdown and over a prolonged period of time. But then also during COVID and during those lockdowns, I lost about 95% of my business. And that was another time where I kind of started to get close to it again. Thankfully for me, I could recognize it coming. And I have really good people around me. So I have coaches and mentors that I work very closely with that will keep me in check for this, for this stuff now. And I think I'm a lot more self-aware to recognize those signals and to do something about it. And I think the big shift for me has been that rest is not the reward. Actually, rest is the prerequisite for me performing well.
Wow. I just want to draw attention to that for our listeners. So rest is not the reward. It's a prerequisite. So you're maybe insinuating that if I don't sleep for a week or only sleep an hour or two each night, that I'm not going to be doing my job very well? Is that what you're saying? Well, who would have ever thought that sleep deprivation would keep me from doing my job?
But as senior leaders, we do it. And, whether it's sleep or whether it's eating regularly or nutritionally, we get into poor cycles. How many people do we know that can't get going in the morning without, a couple of cups of coffee, and then they're needing to have a glass of wine or a beer at night to be able to switch off, and then they're not sleeping so well, and they're not eating so regularly, and they're not getting out in daylight in nature, and they're sitting sedentary in offices or at their computer desks. And we think and we expect that we're going to perform well when biologically that's what we're doing to ourselves. And so the little things do matter. And I would think of it in this way, because there are times when we do need to pay the price, when we won't get the sleep. Maybe we're traveling with work. Maybe there's a big project or a key deadline, or, something's hit the fan with a key client or whatever it is. And so there are times when we will have to pay the price as leaders. But it's about getting back to those really good habits as soon as we can. And the other thing that I found really helpful in this is thinking about, when we think about our habits, whether that's the amount of time we spend in bed, whether that's, the nutritious meals that we eat regularly, that how well hydrated we are, whatever they are, the movement, the exercise, etc. Whatever those habits are for each of us individually, have a baseline, have a base target, something that you could hit that's so easy to hit that even when you're paying the price and it's tough, you're still hitting that base level target. And then have an elite level target that for when those, when the days are, when you're not paying the price days, and maybe you're this comes from Brian Johnson actually, and he talks about three types of days. Your bubble wrap days, where you can literally wrap yourself in bubble wrap and have an amazing, kind of a spa day or do whatever you like kind of day. You can totally do the self-care. They're very few and far between. Most of us are out in the wild, that we're kind of there most of the time, like fighting our way through life and home and kind of just all the stuff that's going on. And then you've got the paying the price days. So actually, how can we make this more realistic for ourselves with having base level targets, something that even if we're paying the price, we can hit those base level targets each and every day, and elite level targets for when maybe we're out in the wild or we're doing a bubble wrap day that we can then meet. And it keeps us on the right trajectory. It keeps you restoring, because there's demands that are being made of us as leaders. And if we don't have the capacity to meet those demands in that gap, it feels uncomfortable. And so how are we regularly restoring? We spend so much time making sure our mobile devices computers and everything have the energy to perform and, do their job. But are we making sure we're restored and that we have the energy to do the jobs that we need to do?
I love that analogy. And I'm thinking about the number of people over the past 5 to 10 years that I've run into that have asked me for a power cord. Like, I need to charge my device. Can I borrow your power cord? I haven't slept in 3 days, but I need to charge my phone. That's ridiculous when you think about it. But I was also thinking it would be a lot easier if they would develop something that we could just plug into and it would recharge us. I don't think that's going to happen. So you were talking about the capacity and that gap and the demands that are on us. I mean, honestly, how often do you believe from your experiences is some of this just we are too, that leaders are